Hello and welcome to this session, which is on the Native Education Collaboration, supporting Native students through collaboration and consultation. And my name is Amy Bitterman. I am with WESTAT and the National Comprehensive Center, and I'm joined by Mandy Smoker Broadus. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, my name's Mandy and I work for Education Northwest, which is the Region 16 Comprehensive Center. And I partner with Amy on this project for the National Comprehensive Center.
Thanks. So just a couple things to get us started. If you all would like to go ahead and in the chat, just put your name and where you're from, and we'll be using the chat. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts as we're going through the presentation, please put them in the chat box. And then also we hope to, at the end, if you all are able to unmute and have some discussion, but please definitely use the chat box. And we'll just get a sense of who's on and where everybody is from to get us started. I'll kick things off by just walking through the agenda of what we have planned. The first thing is sort of introducing you to the Native Education Collaborative and what that is, what that means, some of the background about it, and then move into the different tools and resources that we've created, including we have a resource bank, and we'll tell you about that and show you what that is, several different toolkits, one specific for tribal consultation, and then a couple other resources that we have created called Circles of Reflection. We have two different versions of those that we're going to be walking through with you and describing and showing you the different accompanying materials that go along with them. And we're really excited because hot off the press, we have a version for the STEP grant and also a version for the state education agencies, an online toolkit that is almost live, and we'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview of what that's going to look like, and then have some discussion. So first, if you aren't familiar with the National Comprehensive Center, or what we call the CC network, the Comprehensive Center Network is made up of 20 different centers. 19 of those are regional, and like the one Mandy mentioned is one of the regional centers, and the regional centers are responsible for working with and supporting a group of states regionally, and that ranges from maybe 2 states to, I'm not sure, maybe some have 4 or 5 states that they work with. And then there's one national center. I'm with the National Comprehensive Center, and Mandy is also working, on this project with the National Comprehensive Center. And really the kind of overall goal of the CC network is to help build capacity of state education agencies, as well as regional education agencies, local education agencies or districts, tribal education agencies, and schools, to really try to improve educational outcomes for all students and close achievement gaps and improve the quality of instruction. So it's a pretty broad scope and reach. But we at the National Center have kind of a unique role in that we're kind of there to coordinate and collaborate and communicate across the entire CC network. So all of the regions, we work with all of the regional centers as well as their states and districts to kind of tackle some of those cross-cutting high leverage problems that emerge, and really just ensure that there is collaboration and communication and efficiency really across the whole network. And then, I don't know, Mandy, if you want to pop in the chat, or I can, the link here. So if you want to check out, who your regional comprehensive center might be based on the state that you're in, you can look it up and, reach out if there are questions or support that you might be seeking. So in terms of our project, the Native Education Collaborative, in 2019, the National Comprehensive Center was awarded a 1-year grant through the U.S. Department of Education, funded through Title VI funding, to really try to develop resources and build the capacity of state education agencies in collaboration with local education agencies or districts, as well as tribal education agencies, to really try to enhance and strengthen that collaboration and ability for those different groups to come together and really try to work to improve outcomes and education for Native students and really for all students in Native education. And another piece too to that Mandy will be talking a little bit about is really helping to support those tribal consultation requirements that are in the Every Student Succeeds Act. And we'll hear a bit more about that in a moment. Here's a list of kind of our main project team. So just want to acknowledge this really wonderful group that came together starting in 2019, made up of a number of really fantastic Native education experts who have that lived experience and have enabled our group, all of us, to really better understand the needs in Native education and have that, first, our ability for that foundation to really develop these resources and build capacity and support the implementation of all of the work that you will be hearing about. Oops. And I think I'm turning it over to Mandy.
Thanks, Amy. I do want to point out when Amy was talking about the comprehensive center network and how those sort of exist in regions across the country. Many of them, like mine, we're Region 16 and we serve Montana and Idaho, have Native education staff that you, again, if Amy, when Amy puts, I couldn't find it, Amy, when she puts the link, you can look at who serves your state. And there are folks that work in those entities that have a lot of expertise and experience and can be a really good resource in the future to both districts and tribes. So, the full purpose and intent of the Native Education Collaborative, as Amy sort of talked about already, is really to advance Native education and to really help build up tribes and tribal communities to have more impact and influence and control over the systems that serve our youngest citizens, and to be really thoughtful about how we do that, knowing it's a complex history, and that we really hope for increased collaboration. You can go to the next slide, Amy. Because we know that this is, law, it is a requirement. We hope, that these sort of good faith relationships exist or develop so that the intent behind the tribal consultation requirement in the law, is to help ensure and guarantee that there is more of that conversation and dialogue occurring. But if it's not, then tribes and districts both, or if it's not happening with districts, tribes have the right to request those consultations regarding different formula grants and other programming. And the one caveat there is that districts have to have a Title VI program and receive over $40,000 or have more than 50% American Indian enrollment in their district. So this all ties into circles of reflection and some other pieces that we're going to talk about in a few minutes that are part of this work, because again, we want those consultations, we want those partnerships and all of those relationships to be as meaningful and productive as possible. And so a lot of what we've pulled together in the collaborative and on the website is intended to support that, specifically for tribes and the districts that serve large populations of Native students. This is always the big question when it comes to the law and consultation. What does it mean to be timely in that effort? This is, again, initially it's supposed to be the school district or the LEA that you see there that's supposed to initiate contact, because most likely they've been notified by their state education department of the requirement to have consultation with a particular tribe or tribes. And the real intent of this is to engage early and often, and not as an afterthought, right? When plans and other pieces to the title programs and others have already been developed. This is intended to, bring everybody together early on. And as I said earlier, if that is not initiated by a school district or LEA, tribes can make that formal request either to the district or to the state. And we, really believe and support that these should be regular meetings, these consultations. You want to, of course, have time to build relationships and get to know one another from the tribe and the district's perspective. But you really, again, want to make this a regular occurrence, and to make sure that tribes are at the table and really have the opportunity to share their own ideas and suggestions for these different programs that exist in schools. Again, this is considered a government to government relationship between a school district that has a locally elected board of trustees, as well as the tribal government itself. And just, that we all hope and aspire to do this work, this collaboration with respect, and that we develop processes that work for everybody that's participating. So we did a bit of work in the beginning, talked to a lot of folks around the country, Native education experts and leaders and advocates. And that group really helped us determine sort of, what might this collaborative strive for? What could it achieve that would be meaningful, both for tribal consultation, but also just for more resources, more good information, and hopefully more growth in our school districts. So some of the top ideas that emerged were to think about new resources that could help schools and tribes, and consider a self-reflection process. And we're going to talk about that because that's actually the circles of reflection. And obviously, anything developed or that's on the website needs to be culturally grounded and appropriate, and definitely, center Native perspectives and Native work in these areas in education. So again, that team of experts that we engaged with early on helped hone in and narrow down for now to 6 topics that were that those experts really considered to be some of the most pressing and some of the most important that the collaborative should really dive into. So you can see there those 6 areas: culture and language, consultation and sovereignty, teachers and leaders, college and career readiness, physical and behavioral health, and then identifying promising programs and practices that can be sort of grown and spread where that will work. The second phase of this work, hi, Dr. Lamb, I see your comment in the chat. They are not in rank order by those experts that we spoke to. So the second consideration was to really think about resources that we could sort of pull together that could be meaningful because there's a lot of research, a lot of information, a lot of really good effort around the country. And so we wanted to sort of get in there and see what was available. And that resulted in a literature review that is available on the collaborative website. And we really hope that folks use that, because it's work that's already been done and that we will continue to add to. And those lit reviews, again, are focused on those 6 categories for now. We might, consider expanding that out into other areas in the future. There are also other resources and material related on that part of the website.
You want me to go to the website, Mandy?
Sure.
Okay. Here we go.
So here we have the collaborative. If you scroll down just a little bit, we placed the STEP grant notification on there, since we're helping out with a small piece of that, but you can keep going. And so you can see that on the left are, again, those 6 categories are all listed there. On the right are some more specific resources. We have a couple toolkits. What else do we have there, Amy? A little farther down. We actually have a tribal consultation toolkit that's available. If you go to the Native Education Resources section, that's where the literature review is. That's hopefully a valuable resource. And you can see there, it's sort of divided up into those categories. So related to Native culture and language, we, in doing this literature review, did a very comprehensive scan around the country to sort of, pull out some of the pieces that we thought, are most timely and could be really beneficial, to tribes, to schools that are trying to do more work in that area. Again, we wanted to eliminate the step of an entity or a person or a group necessarily having to go and find that all on their own. So we hope it's useful. Then if you go to the left, we'll just click on one of the areas. Let's try effective teachers and leaders, maybe, I guess. And then if you scroll down, what you'll see first is a brief that is there. And I really like these briefs. I think they have a lot of really valuable contextual information. And these briefs were compiled by Dr. Martin Reinhardt up there in Michigan. And he was really thoughtful in sort of, again, setting up a context for these different topics and just providing, a lot of really valuable information. So that's a bit about the website. If you go and sort of look around, there's a lot of great tools and resources that we hope people will explore. And Amy just put the link in the chat. And I already mentioned these briefly, but there are 2 toolkits that we have developed over time. Advocating for Native students, and then the Tribal Consultation Toolkit. And again, we hope that communities, tribes, schools find those to be useful in their own efforts. And we fully intend for obviously everything we generate to be 100% adaptable to a local context, because we know that this isn't one size fits all. No guide, no toolkit, no document is gonna work all across Indian country. So, take them and really dive into them and make them your own. So this is probably one of, I think, the biggest pieces of our work at the collaborative. And that was to develop a tool or resources that state education departments could utilize. And we're going to walk a little bit through the process and talk a little bit about some of the states that we've worked in, and then about how this is adaptable.
Thanks, Mandy.
Mhm.
Just pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions you want to put in the chat or comments in regards to what we've discussed so far, but definitely feel free to ask any questions along the way. Oh, I didn't share the link with everybody. It looks like okay. Let me share that again and confirm everyone can see it. Hopefully now everyone has access to that. So that's what Mandy was just showing a few minutes ago. All right, so we're gonna dig in here and kind of start out, like Mandy said, where we developed this initially really as a tool for SEAs, to start with the SEAs, the state education agencies, and really be able to reflect on and think about deeply, what are we doing for our Native students and what aren't we doing? And then bringing in others to kind of give their perspective and then kind of work towards some goals and some ways to really try to improve, what we've been doing and do better. But we've definitely, been talking over the last few years, and now with this STEP grant opportunity that we'll talk a little bit more about, we are really excited and want to be able to, do more with this toolkit and be able to put it out there so that, yes, SEAs can take this and use it, but so could a district if, they are serving Native students and really feel like we need to, focus more and kind of see where we're at and make some decisions and do some strategic planning to implement some strategies. And we need to bring in, the tribal voice as well as other, community members, that can be done too using this tool. And similarly, a tribal education agency who really wants to kind of reflect on maybe the work that they've been doing and bring in the voices from the districts, from parents. So the first couple slides, I'm kind of going to talk at a more general level in terms of what the process looks like. So you can kind of think about maybe in your particular context, how this might work, how it might be applicable, and like who maybe would be the driving kind of force to do this. But probably I'll, be using some examples as we talk about it too. And as Mandy kind of alluded to, so far, we have worked with a number of state education agencies to implement circles. That's sort of what we can draw on as, our experience to date doing this. But just want, to emphasize and keep in mind that we are always thinking and would like you to always be thinking too about how this would really fit in your work and benefit, your line and agencies and organizations. But it's a 3-phase process, and bringing together, not exclusively, but really the focus is the state education agency, districts within the state education agency that are serving larger numbers of Native students, as well as the tribal education agencies, to have these rich, reflective discussions and also really, do some strategic planning. And some of the benefits that I think we have seen of going through this process include that it really can help advance, the tribe's roles in the lives of Native students, and opens up these communication lines that have often, been challenged, and it's, haven't had a lot of communication maybe in the past, or it's been kind of more fraught. So this is really trying to bridge some of those gaps. and also just improve and just show that there's some transparency and accountability in terms of what the state and the districts are doing for Native students. So we have the 3 circles, and generally kind of what happens in that first circle, what's called seeing from the inside out. And that's where the group of interest, or, you know, the tribe or the district, the state, the one who is sort of most interested in going through this process and wanting to find out how they're doing and how they can collaborate with others to improve. They meet internally for the most part. So when we're doing it with the state education agency, it was just kind of the state education agency folks first coming together. And those 6 topics that Mandy showed you, we have reflection questions, 3 or 4 that are tied to each of those topics. So they go through with the facilitator and basically respond to those questions and just talk about, you know, what they're doing in each of those areas, what they have been doing, maybe what they've done in the past. And then in the second circle, that same kind of group from the first circle, they're present, but their role is really to be active listeners, while the new participants that come into that second circle would be the ones who are sort of outside of that organization or agency that was the focus in the first circle. So when we worked with the state education agencies, then we brought in tribal education departments, tribes, tribal education agencies, as well as the districts. And they're there to kind of review what that first circle described initially in terms of what they're doing, you know, for Native students in these different areas. And then they have the opportunity to agree, disagree, add on to, but really give their voice to all of this work that was described, or lack of work that might have been discussed in that first circle. And then in the third circle, kind of everything that's been learned and all the information and data that have been gathered in the first and second circle kind of culminate, and decisions are sort of made as a group as to, okay, from all we've talked about, what are some of the kind of higher priority areas that we really want to develop some action plans around and implement those moving forward. So that's sort of the overall picture of what this process looks like, and we'll dig in a bit more to each of those circles. But did want to mention the Circles of Reflection toolkit for the SEAs that we currently have on our website. You'll see there's kind of a big, like 50-page or so PDF document that sort of walks through the process. But what we've been working on now for a few months, and should be launched next week on the website, is really this more user-friendly, online, interactive kind of process where we have the website itself that has information and kind of an overall description of what it looks like. But then also along with it, we have a number of documents, templates that you can download and will be modifiable. Like the reflection questions are in a Word document where we have the questions. There's space where someone would be typing, notes while the discussion is going on, but those can, obviously you can remove questions, add questions, modify questions. We also have facilitation guides. We have one facilitation guide actually for each of our 3 circles, which is really sort of in-depth, step by step. Here's kind of, at least from the experiences that we've had so far in implementing circles, here's sort of some tips and what's worked, example agendas for both the participants, and then this sort of more detailed run of show or a facilitator agenda that kind of gives you, potential timings of things, who would be going through sort of each piece, what materials might you use sort of for each component as you go through each circle, as well as presentation slides. So when we've done this with the states that we've done this with so far, we had some PowerPoints that we used with them, and we sort of took those and made them so that they're available to use and modify and add, you know, the specific information and all of that for your own situation. And then we also want to emphasize too, to really use that resource bank that Mandy pointed out, as it does, you know, map right up to the 6 categories that are in circles of reflection. That's how the resource bank is organized. So as the groups that are implementing circles are kind of going through and maybe feel like, well, teachers and leaders is something we need to work on, and maybe, you know, teacher recruitment, we need to recruit more Native teachers. If we go into the resource bank, you're going to see some of those examples and reports and just information that will be really helpful as you know, are thinking about and developing your action plans, especially in that 3rd circle. And I'm just going to take a moment and just kind of give you a little sneak peek of what the website looks like. And hopefully once it is available, like I said, next week, please double check and please start looking at it and using it. Here we go. So this is what it looks like. We have a lot of pretty landscape pictures on here, and sort of the navigation of it is on this right side, but trying to keep it, you know, fairly concise, and so that it's not going to be overwhelming at first when you kind of read through the material, but just to give you an idea of what is involved and who is involved. We have a section on like what you need to know to really get started in this work. Kind of the length of time estimation, you know, that each of these circles might take, who would participate in each of these circles, you know, a high level agenda, roles and responsibilities. And then we also have sections, you know, specific to each of the circles themselves, where we talk through, and we'll have links to the different materials that accompany each circle. And sort of this information, I think, is really meant for maybe the participants, not necessarily in terms of the facilitator. Like I mentioned, we're going to have those facilitation guides that really go into a lot more depth. But this just gives a good kind of overview and sense of what this is going to look like as you're getting started, and inviting folks to take part in it. Okay. So getting a little bit more into each of the individual circles. The first circle, the real kind of, I would say, 2 primary, or sort of, they have the biggest role in some ways, maybe in this whole process, not just in the first circle, but is the person that we kind of call the lead. And that's really the person who has the greatest responsibility within that organization or agency for Native education. So when we've done this with state education agencies, it's typically been, you know, the director of Indian education within the SEA. And then that person is really kind of the one who's trying to get the buy-in from, you know, the state to actually move forward and do this work, but also, you know, inviting and reaching out to the other participants who would be joining in the 2nd and 3rd circle. And, you know, they're really doing a lot of the preparation work to kind of get things going. And the facilitator is another, you know, major role in all of this. There doesn't have to be a facilitator. Mandy will talk a little bit more about, you know, with the STEP grant and what that might look like in terms of this role. But when we have implemented this with the states, there has been a facilitator, and that has been Mandy for a few states. It's been some of the people that I think I showed earlier on a slide, but people that have been kind of members of our core team for this project that helped develop these materials. And we really feel like a strength of this work is having that facilitator to come in and really guide. And the project or the discussions along. And, you know, it being someone who is skilled in facilitation is really a helpful element there, someone who's unbiased, but does have a strong understanding and knowledge of the tribes, of the state. But really that person obviously has to, you know, really maintain that balance of perspectives. So that's really crucial. So the lead and the facilitator, you know, are working really closely together to get ready for that first circle. One of the main things they're doing is going through those reflection questions together and deciding, you know, we need to reword this so that this language really fits how we talk and the words that we use in our state or in our district. Or this question doesn't really apply to us, or we don't want to ask this, or we really want to get at, you know, this other thing that's not captured here. Let's add that question. So there's all kind of, you know, that type of getting ready for the circle, that those two or more, sometimes it's been a couple people from the state who are kind of working on getting things started and the invitations. And then in that first circle, there's several kind of pieces to it. One of those that we have found to be really kind of impactful is sharing some data about Native students in the state, so that if in the example of the state education agency, there were, you know, people in some of these states that really weren't that familiar with data on Native students and what their test scores look like and attendance and special education rates and those types of things. So it really kind of helped provide some of that context to everyone. And then, like I've already said, you know, that facilitator comes in and kind of talks through each of those questions, and the group just talks about how they are, the activities that they're doing, the work they've been doing in each of those areas, or they may say, we haven't done anything at all really in this, you know, in this particular topic. And then also they're giving themselves sort of a level of effectiveness after they talk through each of these questions. Everyone in the first circle will indicate, you know, do we feel like we're really strong in this area, kind of based on this conversation and what we know, or is this something that we're weaker in, or we're really not doing anything in this area? And then in terms of who within that organization, whether it's the tribe or the district or the LEA in that first circle, really it's going to vary. But if we're talking about the state education agency, it's really important to have staff who are involved in the SEA's consolidated plan and implementation, and really anyone that touches Native education, and that really is everyone within the, or should be everyone within the SEA. But we have seen and encourage, you know, more leadership roles to participate, ones who might have some decision-making authority. But we've had, you know, directors and deputy assistant superintendents in the areas of curriculum and assessment, special education, title services, educator effectiveness. And I think having that broad group has really been definitely a good strategy, because it's a capacity building session, you know, in and of itself, for all of those individuals to really be part of that discussion. And here again are those 6 categories that Mandy already went through. And we have here just an example of one of the questions to give you kind of a flavor of what they're like. And this is one that is in the Native language and culture category. So the facilitator would say to the group, briefly describe policies, programs, and practices that provide for the inclusion of Native history and culture in the curriculum for students. So we would kind of go around and everyone would contribute if they have something to contribute. And then once there's been discussion, then everyone would provide kind of what their level is that they think in terms of effectiveness and impact based on what a group has described that they're doing. it does look like we have a question. So what would you consider ample time to effectively go through the process of migrating through the circles to reach their goal? Is there a moment in which a goal is identified specifically? Yeah, there is a lot here to unpack and go through, and it can, is a time, it does take time. You want to make sure that you are giving it, sufficient time. And it varies a little for this particular, for the SEA version that we're talking about. I think we have given some time estimates for the first circle in like the, I don't know, Mandy, what do we say? Like 4-hour, half day range?
It takes multiple hours for each circle.
Yeah.
And then it's the span of time between each meeting will vary as well, depending on availability of folks, and all those other sort of challenges in scheduling. It's nice to try to get it all, I would say, done within a 2-month span, because then that feels like everyone's really active and you're building some momentum. And it's in the third circle that the group really identifies those goals based on all the data, all the discussion. And they pretty clearly so far in where we've worked with circles, they've emerged pretty naturally, I'd say.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's taken, ideally, it would be over a few months time period. The first circle, maybe half a day of actual time spent together in the circle, but there is, of course, more time for that lead person and the facilitator for the planning and everything in between the circles. The second circle generally is, I think, a bit longer, maybe more. Sometimes in some cases we've done kind of like 2 half days, or maybe 6 hours with obviously a lot of good breaks in there. One thing I'll mention too is that when we initially received the funding and were developing this, we had planned on doing all of these in person, which I think is what the ideal would be for this kind of work. But unfortunately with COVID, we did the ones we've done so far all virtually, and hope that as more states and for the STEP grant and others decide to do this, there will be more in-person use for it. I think I've already talked a little bit about the second circle, where you would then bring in those who are sort of from outside of that first circle group. So in the case of the SEAs, bringing in tribes, districts. We saw with one of the states that we worked with had community and parents, had some discussions with them as part of all of this as well. And then, of course, the first circle folks are there just to really listen and hear what these others have to say and how they want to add, validate, clarify the information that those first circle participants laid out. Also in that second circle, everyone sort of thinks about all of the different questions and topics that they've gone through and identifies sort of a priority level. Do we feel like this is something that's a real high priority for us, or something that maybe is a lower priority? And that's kind of a big piece of what helps going into that third circle when it comes time to identify, we've potentially covered a whole lot of different areas here, but really we need to sort of narrow in now on maybe 2 or 3 that we really think in terms of short-term planning. These are things, realistically that we feel like we could accomplish maybe within 90 days, and then maybe 1 or 2 other sort of longer-term goals. And then during the third circle is when we have some templates available that the group, again, guided by that facilitator, would walk through and complete, thinking about, what the priorities are, what are the strategies, activities that we're going to take, what are the steps to achieve that ultimate goal. And in that third circle too, it's includes the folks from that first circle, for sure, but then also bringing in additional members who are part of the second circle. So again, in the case of the SEA, having some of the tribes and the districts that were in that second circle participate in the third circle too, because they really become part of the team. You know, this is not just now you've heard, you know, from the tribes and districts what they think, and now we're just going to go off as the state and do some of this ourselves and see how that works out. But no, it's really intentionally having, if they're interested, the districts and the tribes be part of the teams. And as we're doing these action plans, you know, they're noted down as, okay, so-and-so from this district is going to be responsible for doing X, Y, or Z, and kind of assigning tasks to all of the different groups to really reinforce and sustain that collaboration that we're trying to achieve through all of this. And see if there was anything else in that. So that's, yeah, those are the 3 circles for the SEA for the most part. But again, you know, really trying to think about how that same process could be used for different purposes, different organizations or agencies. And we have worked with the 5 states that you see here: Idaho, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Washington are part of our pilot. And then we've implemented with Wisconsin, which was interesting because they chose to focus on early childhood Native education. So we had an opportunity there to really dig into those questions. And we did do quite a bit of modification to the questions. So that was fun and really, I think, yes, that's what we'll do next. But I think it was a, you know, I think in a number of ways was a successful endeavor in all of the states. And to that point, we did do an evaluation of the pilot. So it just really included the first 4 states: Idaho, North Carolina, Washington, and Oklahoma. There were 3 research questions that we were interested in. And I want to mention Janet Gordon with Kaufman and Associates is who conducted the evaluation using a mixed methods approach. We took a lot of notes during all of the circles to indicate, you know, where there's areas of agreement, where there's areas of disagreement, how were all of the individuals and groups collaborating with one another. She also conducted interviews with the state leads and with the facilitators. And these are the 3 questions that we wanted to dig into and try to answer. We wanted to know if circles of reflection increased awareness of critical aspects of American Indian and Alaska Native student education. We wanted to know if there was evidence, and what that was, that engaging in circles of reflection promoted collaboration. And then what are some of the important findings and implications of this work? So here's just a little kind of taste of some of the things that we noted in terms of an increased awareness. Definitely on the part of the SEA, they definitely saw or kind of came out of the circle really understanding that tribal communities needed to be involved and much more involved than they have been across the board. That tribes should be acknowledged as sovereign nations, and the importance of tribal consultation and of tracking that tribal consultation, and that tribes really need to be part of decision-making about all Native education related initiatives. And there's a number of other things kind of that we noted during the first few circles in all of the states. In terms of the other question, one of the other questions we were looking at, and is there evidence that engaging the process promoted collaboration? We definitely feel that, you know, evidence of that was that in that third circle, every state made up of a team of the SEA, districts, and tribes generated action plans for 1 to 3 short-term 90-day goals, and also for a couple longer-term goals. So you'll see here we have listed a few examples of what they arrived at for how they wanted to focus those action plans. And it was really, you know, a wide range of areas that the different states wanted to tackle, from tribal consultation to focusing on, you know, the importance of entering data for Native students. So these are just a few of those areas. And that kind of wraps it up for the SEA version. Are there any questions, comments? I see a question in the Q&A. Any research or experience to engage elementary education in circles of reflection? And can you say a little more about, do you mean doing that at the school level, whether this is a process that might work at the school level, or, and you might be able to unmute if that's easier. Because we have in the 5 states that we've worked in, it has been the state education department, you know, who oversees elementary education. This has really been about. So I don't know if you mean in another way. The schools and the kids. Yeah. I mean, I think what Mandy's going to get into a little bit with the STEP grant kind of takes it down. I think we do want to look at more at the local level, how this could be a useful tool, and are hoping that you all might think about that and have ideas. And because that's something we at the National Center would love to be able to support if we hear and are going to be working on for sure too. If there's districts, you know, that really want to implement this, you know, we're there to help kind of adapt this with you into a version that you could use in that way. And the STEP grant, I think, is an example of that. So I'll turn it over to Mandy.
Great. So we're just gonna, you know, quickly point out that we have modified the larger version of circles that Amy just walked through at the request of the Office of Indian Education as a tool and resource that can be used for applicants in the new STEP grant cycle. Same sort of, you know, basic gist as before. We have an overview, a facilitation guide. And again, as Amy said, knowing that this might be someone from the tribe specifically that is both leading and facilitating, so taking that into consideration. Reflection questions worksheet that are paired up to STEP grant application components, and then a STEP grant planning worksheet, which allows for you know, really time to consider what activities based on all of this rich discussion and data, you know, should we really transition into our STEP grant application that's applicable for those priorities. And then again, just sending people hopefully to the resource bank, because there's a lot of great tools and ideas and research there that can be helpful in this overall process. So, oh, and we should point out that on the collaborative website and hopefully the OIE website, there is a little recorded webinar where Amy and I talk a little bit more about STEP and circles. So in the future, you know, we think that we can really grow our categories in particular, that we should, as someone mentioned in the comments, you know, think about other stakeholders that would be really important to involve. In Washington State, for example, they invited a team of parents to the table, which was great. And then how do we, you know, really drill this down so that it is, you know, that tribes and districts are coming together to have those really that meaningful dialogue. And then every time we talk about circles, we always hear other suggestions or considerations. So if you have any, definitely please put those in the chat for us. So, we always have a few discussion questions at the end. You know, is this something, that you think in your context could be implemented? What might be that purpose or that intention? And then, what would you include or take out or add? Because it again is intended to be very adaptable. For every state we've worked in, we have changed questions, moved things around, added entirely new categories. So that's, it's intended to be that flexible. If you have a question or a response and you want to come off mute, you're welcome to, or you can type something in the chat. Or at the end, Amy and I will leave our emails, our contact information. So if you want to send something our way, that'd be great. We can probably move along then, Amy. If something pops up, we'll talk about it. So that's where you can contact Amy and I.
We can maybe put them in the chat too. It might be easier for people.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Lamb. And then we are asked to remind all participants that there's a final networking session of the day that starts, I believe it, in just a bit. They want to, again, point folks to the social wall, the discussion board, check out the resource library. And as always, the TA team is really great. So if you have any questions or follow-up, you can definitely reach out to them. We appreciate you joining us today. Again, if you have any thoughts or ideas or considerations, please let us know down the road.
Thank you, Mandy and Amy, for presenting. I just want to remind everybody that every session will be made available at the end of that day's meeting. For example, at the end of today's meeting, you can watch Mandy and Amy's session after it's been recorded and posted to the website. It will be available for 1 month after the PD meeting is over. So make sure to absorb all that information. Thanks.